Okay, you tell me, would you ever want to meet someone who is described as creep, lonely, bland, black sheep, nosy, creep, disrespectful, useless, sexist, rude, arrogant, insult-feature rapist, red flag, and creep? These descriptors in combination are red flags for most people. Even some of the phrases as a standalone are already bad enough. Like, for example, when I said future rapist, well, would you ever want to be called that? Unfortunately for Bryan Kohberger, these are the revolving phrases that are being used to describe him over and over again, from multiple police reports spanning different interviews during his time at Washington State University. And I'm laughing a little bit because he wasn't even there for very long. He was only there for about a 6 months time span, and it seems like he really just did not give a good impression to many people, including the faculty members, his colleagues, the students that he interacted with, other people outside the school environment that he interacted with. It was always the same thing, that he was creepy, that he was kind of arrogant, that it seems like he would monologue all the time, and that most people just couldn't wait to get away from him. Since Kohberger's sentencing, he has been locked away in prison. There has been some surfacing complaints that he's filed against the prison, complaining about food items missing from his tray, and that the block that he's in, it stinks, there's been flooding, and the harassment that he's getting from other inmates. Now, he's probably in some sort of like a solitary confinement type of thing, and maybe he just hears them yelling at them. There's also been some very unfortunate selfies that has been released to the public from his cell phone. Him posing, I mean, honestly, like, it's your private cell phone. You know, people take selfies, sometimes they're cringe, but some of them look kind of normal, I guess. But given his background and what he has done, I mean, this is very eerie to a lot of people. Yeah, I'm sorry for the nightmares. Y'all might have some sleep paralysis tonight. Now, we're winding it back a little bit about his complaints at WSU. Let's go over there. Washington State University was supposed to be a fresh start from him. You know, he spent most of his time in Pennsylvania. He had his drug stint there. He recovered. He went back to school, did really well. And moving into a completely different state, into a totally different coast, it was a new beginning for him to make new friends, for him to maybe get into a new relationship. And it's possible that maybe he just wanted to create a completely new, you know, go to the character creation mode in Dark Souls and just create a completely new person, one that is different than the Pennsylvania Bryan. Washington Bryan is going to be the one that has friends. Washington Bryan is going to be the one that's intelligent, seen as someone that people would revere to. However, all that just completely went down to shithole because Bryan just didn't know how to interact with people, I guess. When it came to just being awkward, here's what they describe Kohberger as. Kohberger, socially awkward around people. Came across as lonely, would start up conversations about hiking in the local area. The only thing she felt off about Kohberger was his intense stare. He would intensely stare at people even when he wasn't having conversation with that person. Here's another classmate where they said they didn't really like Kohberger based on their interactions with him. However, you know, they were trying to give him benefit of the doubt because it seemed like Kohberger was really trying hard to overly impress them. When asked if Kohberger had any friends, she was unaware of anyone that was friends with Bryan Kohberger, unfortunately. Also, he didn't have social media, and that he liked to spend a lot of times alone in the woods. A classmate in a different police report said that they didn't believe they ever saw anyone with Bryan Kohberger that they believe was his friend. It seems like Kohberger never made any friends. Additionally, Kohberger generally tried and wanted to be friends with people, but he did not know how. Another describes him as a black sheep of the cohort and very much to himself. And this might start sounding like some mean bullying shit because here's one that says she believed the reason for the student spacing out was to distance himself from Kohberger. This next person was a contact found in Kohberger's phone. So law enforcement took her in for an interview to see, you know, tell us what you know about Bryan Kohberger. So she said that Kohberger approached her and started talking about taking a personality test for introverted and extroverted personalities. He talked about being a student at WSU in a criminology program. She found Kohberger's conversation about personalities to be a weird topic to discuss at a party and became bored of the conversation. They exchanged phone numbers so he could text her a link to take a survey. She never saw him again after the party. He did text her sometime later asking if she had taken the survey. She never did respond. Now, this seems to be a same pool party, but with a different person. It was a very bland conversation, and she wasn't very interested in talking to him. He was in her vicinity and kept trying to join her in conversations with her. She thought it was odd. He seemed very used to being put off by women, but he seemed okay with that. And how I read that, it seems like Kohberger just doesn't care if women were uncomfortable or if they ignored him, because to him, the end result was always the same. It was always them casting him away. So to him, it's like, well, who cares about the interaction? You weren't going to be my friend anyway. And I know that I'm reading a lot into this and, you know, bear with me here, but I think he was just so focused on being really persistent that he was being blindsided by his end goal, which was, making a friend. To him, it was like, oh, I want to make a friend. I want to make a friend. I want to make a friend. And he was focusing too much on the I part and not on the they part, because conversations, friendships, it's a two-way road. And it's almost as if he's kind of like, well, fuck their road. I'm just going to drive in the middle because I'm so focused on getting from A to Z. It's like he's not giving a damn about the oncoming traffic. And guess what? What are they doing? They're like veering away and like trying to dodge him. He made beelines to where he wanted to go. It seemed like he wanted to make friends, but felt uncomfortable. This one is also a strange but yet awkward behavior where they said Kohberger is very nosy, tries to look at what other people are texting. This person from a barbecue said that Kohberger had tried to have personal conversations with her on a few occasions, asking questions like where she lives, what kind of dog she owns. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking someone what kind of dog they own, but like where someone lives, it depends on the person. If you think they're trying to hit on you and be a creep on you, then it's kind of like, ooh, why are you asking me this question? There was a colleague that worked with Kohberger, and here's what she had to say about him. She said he didn't get the hint that she wanted him to leave when he was in her office. She said that she had to leave her own office in order to get him to leave her office. Kohberger was apparently a TA, teaching assistant, for a 101 class, so like a basic class. 3 female students from that class told this person that Kohberger was an awkward guy who would hang around and try to contribute to conversations that he was not a part of. There was apparently one student that said no one wanted to talk to Kohberger or even hang around him. A student in one of Kohberger's classes that he was a TA of, his impression of Kohberger was that Kohberger was standoffish, a bit odd, and just weird. Now, this isn't just a case of someone just being generally really awkward. We all have social anxiety here and there, and sometimes we are awkward in social settings. Some people even use alcohol as a way to get to know people and be more relaxed. Although I would say try to do it without that, because otherwise you might become reliant on it. But with Bryan Kohberger, it wasn't just like, oh, this guy's just really awkward and he doesn't know how to make friends. There's always other awkward people out there that you can jive with, and they understand totally where you are. But when you combine that with being really creepy, being really offensive, being controlling, domineering, and all the other adjectives that I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the whole, what do you call it? The soup of it? Can I just say a soup of it? Where we're just like throwing a bunch of things in a pot and stirring it all together. It's not brewing into a perfect storm. Wow, I think I just mixed a bunch of analogies together, but you get what I'm trying to say. I'm bad with analogies. Now, I think a lot of you guys will not agree with me on this next portion, but I do want to point out some of the things that were said about Bryan Kohberger that weren't negative. For example, there were some that said he was quiet, formal, maybe upbeat, chatty, well-read, well-spoken, dressed smartly, nice even, kind of smart, not weird, just off. That's sort of a compliment, right? But again, it was like digging through a haystack, trying to find a little tiny needle there, okay? Like a broken needle, okay? A needle that blends in with a haystack. That's the same color. Our next topic leads us to control. That Kohberger liked to dominate conversations and then even at some point try to exert control over people. Yeesh. I have my notes: blocking the door, preventing someone to leave, or continuing to talk to someone even though they've tried multiple times to terminate the conversation with him. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but we are reading the red part if you guys are following along. So a colleague of Bryan Kohberger said that Kohberger really liked to discuss research. Okay, not bad. He liked to dominate the conversations. Okay. She described him as standing in the doorway and hovering. She never felt uncomfortable around him. All right. He had a macho demeanor around him, and he would appear to be puffed up. I guess, like, I don't know. I'm like, imagine like someone like this or something, or like the red dude from this guy. Yeah, I'll put it in the picture. There you go. That guy right there, the angry dude, but not so angry, maybe awkward. She described having a conversation with him in the office where she tried to end, and he would not stop talking. She told him she was leaving because he wanted to avoid getting a parking violation. She walked out, and he continued to talk to her while she was walking to her car. He was perceived by female classmates as dominant and disrespectful to female instructors. There was a grad student that hit up the hotline to talk about Bryan Kohberger's bloody knuckles. Now, this person made it very clear that they did not like Kohberger, and they recalled Kohberger was constantly talking in like one of their classes. He would pick fights with other classmates, and she describes an argument where apparently someone left the class really upset. She describes Kohberger as weird, but he had never threatened her. Okay, like a little mini bonus, I guess. There's one instance after class, however, where her and Kohberger were completely alone, and she was trying to leave the classroom. However, he blocked her exit. I mean, he's like a pretty big dude. He's like 6 foot something, right? Like, I think like maybe 6 foot flat or 6'1". He was blocking her with his physical stance, and Kohberger said that they should meet up sometime, talk about her professional career. She felt like he wanted to just keep the conversation, or she felt like he just wanted to keep the discussion going, even though the class was over. This classmate describes Kohberger as spatially trapping fellow students in their student offices. Oh gosh. They stated that when she was not around, Kohberger would spatially trap someone in their office for long periods of time, and this person provided the phone number. We'll definitely hear from that person very soon. Regarding Kohberger blocking fellow students in the offices, this person showed an email that said, "Help me, this convo is weird," dated October 28, 2022. They said that Kohberger would stand in the doorway and not leave when it was clear, based on the social cues, the person in the office was packing up and wanting to leave. He's like, "Hey, where are you going? Let me go with you." There's another student that reaches out, I think, to the FBI to assist them and essentially tell them what they know about Kohberger. There was one rumor that she heard about Kohberger being aggressive with the faculty in conversations, like cornering them in hallways and offices, asking out people inappropriately, and mansplaining things. Additionally, we also get to hear from the professors at WSU. One professor said that Kohberger wanted to dominate conversations he participated in. He apparently would even try to correct other students, which was inappropriate to her because she was a professor. That was her job. He was not the professor in there. I think this one's a professor where they discussed Kohberger's tendency to stare at people. They thought maybe Kohberger did it as a way to display power or dominance. A professor even made an observation that nothing really stood out to her in her first interaction with Kohberger other than him wanting to dominate the conversation. There's a classmate that mentioned that he felt like he was being verbally kidnapped as Kohberger continued to want to talk, describing the scenario as a 3-hour conversation in a 5-minute journey. Does that mean they talked so much within that 5-minute journey that it felt like a 3-hour conversation? Or does that mean that it was supposed to be a 5-minute conversation, but it ended up into a 3-hour conversation? This next professor has so much to say about Kohberger. We kept hearing about this confrontation between Kohberger and a faculty member, which would ultimately contribute to him losing his position as a teaching assistant at WSU. Now, it's debated whether or not Kohberger knew about this termination. I was pretty strong on thinking that he knew and that he was lying about coming back to the spring semester. However, I do pull back a little bit. I'm kind of back in the territory of, you know what, I'm actually not quite sure. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe they didn't reach out to him yet. Maybe they didn't tell him yet. Or maybe he was just lying and trying to make it seem like everything was fine at WSU land, even though it seems like everything was going to ruins by this point. But I digress severely. Now let's get to the first incident. It happens on a Friday. Typically by Thursday, the professor already has their 40 hours in. So when Friday rolls around, you're like, no, I'm trying to go home. I don't want to work late night. But Kohberger had a penchant for showing up Friday evening, just simply wanted to talk. And although the professor said that they made it pretty clear they wanted to leave, Kohberger was just not picking that up and just wanted to continue to just talk about anything, you know? Nothing really in particular, and there's really nothing remarkable about the conversation, but this was something that bothered the professor for quite some time now. Because at this point, he's like, well, it's Friday, I'm trying to leave. And although in the past, they've had conversations about, you know, maybe briefing a case or dealing with plagiarism or just, I guess, talk about recreational activities on the Palouse. I think that's like around the area. But after, you know, this one particular day, 10 to 20 minutes go by, and there was an exchange that perturbed the professor, where Kohberger just wouldn't get the point and let the professor go home. At some point, Kohberger told the professor that he was snarky. Now, the professor was like, okay, dude, listen, I'm tired, I'm frustrated. So they told Kohberger to leave his office, and Kohberger simply did not. Not only that, the professor was like, okay, well, you know what? If you're not going to leave, I'm going to leave. So they get up, they walk out of the office, and you know what Kohberger did? Kohberger followed him out of his office and continued talking to him. But there's more. After several late night, afternoon, evening encounters, the professor wasn't sure if Kohberger was trying to curry favor with them or whether he was trying to control their time. At some point, they concluded that Kohberger was possibly power tripping, and by using the professor's time and preventing him from leaving his office, it was a way of controlling the professor in a very conniving, contrived way. But I could see how you could come to that conclusion. And I think this is where they said that they've probably had over 8 other teaching assistants in the past, and they've never had any problems with any of them. Just Kohberger. Then we have a grad student saying that they felt like everything that Kohberger did was very calculated. They said that Kohberger is very intimidated by her friend because she stands up to him. Now, when that friend is around, Kohberger seems to leave her alone. When the friend leaves, Kohberger then turns around and starts talking to her. She said that the way Kohberger behaves toward her is markedly different than when the friend is not around. She talked about when the friend was gone, Kohberger would not leave her alone and prevented her from leaving the class. She said she thought Kohberger's motivation was gratification he got from controlling her. Control, control, control. So was he trying to control people because he got a kick out of it, or did he do it unknowingly because he just wanted to talk to them and he didn't realize that his actions were negatively impacting other people? Maybe a combination of both? Okay, so, being awkward or wanting to exert control, maybe he was just massively misunderstood. However, let's get into the crux of these arguments where he's being called a creep. There are a plethora of comments, criticisms, complaints about Bryan Kohberger just being outright creepy to people. Someone described Kohberger as just hanging around in the hallway, and apparently Kohberger was labeled as creepy. Now, he would simply just stand at someone's desk or their coworkers and just kind of just stare at them. There was this one day where he was blocking the coworker in her desk area. He'd also follow them out to the cars at the end of the day. He continued his behavior, which resulted them arranging someone else to meet with them at 5 o'clock after work to escort them to their cars. That's just how bad it was. There was a grad student that recalled one other staff pulled her aside and made her aware of a possible issue with him stalking another member of the staff. An incident took place where he asked out the other staff member and had followed that individual outside to her car. I don't know what is up with him following people around like this. It's like, if you're not going to give me your time, I'm going to demand for your time. And not only that, I'm going to physically get it out of you by following you around like this. And I think I remember doing this too as a kid to my mom, and she would probably give me the spatula when I was younger, not literally give me a spatula, but probably hit me with it. All right, pool party. Now, we keep hearing about this pool party. I think it was mentioned in one of the docs that came out a couple months ago. But this is a pool party that happened before the school semester started, but it was after Bryan Kohberger had moved into Washington. Now, there were these two women that were approached by Kohberger at the pool party. One of them was really uncomfortable with how Kohberger was talking to her and her friend. She told Kohberger that she was married and tried to end the conversation. And that's usually kind of like a hint that, hey, by the way, I'm not really interested in having this conversation with you. Don't hit on me. And it seems like they tried to end the conversation, but Kohberger continued to talk to them anyway. At one point, someone else came over and intervened. They placed himself between Kohberger and another person, but Kohberger continued to be fixated on the girls. It seems like the interaction finally ended when someone ended up exchanging phone numbers with Kohberger. I do want to bring this up that these reports, these interviews, most of them were done after Kohberger was arrested. So it's possible that when actually being with Bryan Kohberger, maybe there were some actions that he did that were seen as maybe innocuous. But then after learning that he was a murderer, quadruple homicide murderer, maybe some of the actions were seen as more creepier than what they initially thought. Or maybe they're more biased towards him. Or maybe there are some that just exaggerate, or maybe some that just don't like him. I do acknowledge that. However, when we're going through these reports, we're looking for continuity. We're looking for consistency. We're looking to see if one person peddles a narrative, is it going to be backed up by other people's support? That's kind of the way how I look at these reports and evaluate them in order to see whether or not the reporter is disingenuous, or if they're just trying to just contribute and genuinely want to help, or if they just want to be involved just for the sake of, oh, it's a big case, I'm going to be a part of this. Or if they're just outright lying because, I don't know, maybe they have nothing better to do. So what I'm seeing here is I'm just seeing a lot of consistencies and a lot of these complaints against Bryan Kohberger. All right, let's go back. It's also mentioned that Kohberger would have these uninvited visits to a woman's office. Kohberger would be sitting at a seat next to her desk, leaving her stuck talking to him. Now, some of you guys may be thinking oh, you guys are adults. Why can you just tell someone you don't want to talk to them? Well, sometimes when you have exhausted all of the nice tactics and the person still doesn't get the hint, not everyone is willing to be more direct or willing to be a little more aggressive in their approach. And they kind of just do the, well, I guess I'll just deal with it approach type of thing, right? And, especially when you're younger, you're in your late teens or early 20s or even mid 20s, sometimes you're just not comfortable with being a little bit more aggressive or telling people directly what you want and don't want yet. Sometimes that skill just comes, as you get a little bit older. Because, for example, me in my early 20s, mid 20s, maybe even late 20s, I would be probably a prime perfect target for a person like Kohberger. However, me in my 30s, I'm telling you to fuck off. As I'm reading these reports, I'm starting to really see and visualize these network of individuals kind of just working together to deal with this shit environment that Kohberger is creating, this environment of uncomfortableness, this environment of people feeling they're being pushed around. And so it's not just those that are being creeped on or those that are dealing with Kohberger directly. It's the people that are observing those individuals dealing with Kohberger. So, for example, there was a classmate of Kohberger that noticed, well, it seems like Bryan would keep interjecting himself in these conversations with this other person. That person happened to have an office that's across from this person. And this person's like, okay, well, I'm just going to purposely leave my office door open just in case the person across the street needs a place to go, just in case Bryan shows up there and just happens to hang around there. Kohberger's classmates said that other female classmates voiced that Kohberger made them feel uncomfortable, felt unsafe, and that he was creepy. A staff member also observed him staring at people and that he would stand uncomfortably close or leaning over women, making them feel very uncomfortable. Oh, this next one, I have to read you guys the whole thing. So they met Bryan Kohberger when he first came to the office to meet with someone. Shortly thereafter, Kohberger began coming to the office nearly every day to talk. This occurred during business hours. Their conversations became personal instead of focused on his studies or work as a TA. On some days, they'd be working alone from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., which was normal closing hours. Kohberger began coming in there seemingly to talk to this person. She would try to focus on her work, but Kohberger would remain whether or not she interacted heavily with him. Oh, God. So he was just like lingering around. Kohberger asked her if she wanted to get coffee. They declined, saying her girlfriend was here to pick her up and walk away. Take the hint. No, he doesn't. They thought this was inappropriate as they were both students. They told her bosses about the incident, and they did not want her alone with him and informed her of several resources she could use, such as having security escort or simply leaving. They also told her that she was not the first person to have problems with Kohberger. Oh, but there's more. Kohberger continued to come to their office when they were there alone. On one occasion, he would stand directly behind her chair as she was working. Kohberger remained directly behind her for a while and did not move until another advisor came into the room. Only then did Kohberger move away. Oh gosh. Apparently they talked to staff about over 5 times about Kohberger's behavior. And about the third meeting, Kohberger did come into the office as much to... After about the third meeting, Kohberger did not come into the office as much to socialize. They would see Kohberger in the hallway, or he would corner her and attempt to conversate. They would not engage, but Kohberger would attempt to force a conversation. Kohberger physically cornered her, standing in a manner where she could not leave without running into him. She described this as very scary, especially when she was alone. She saw Kohberger walking outside as she was locking up. Kohberger had made eye contact with her when she looked out, which seemed strange because you would have to be looking directly at the window where she worked at to make eye contact. Kohberger entered the building as she was leaving. They hurried into the bathroom to hide and to avoid contact with Kohberger. When she thought about it later, she hid as if on instinct due to how uncomfortable contact with Kohberger had become. It was so bad that sometimes the boss would take her home so she would not have to walk by herself or take the bus. They were very concerned because of how many precautions she perceived were being taken because of Kohberger. And they mentioned that every single interaction they had with Kohberger were all uncomfortable, with the exception of the first interaction. Now, what I've been seeing is that either people off the bat think that he's ordinary, and then upon meeting him a second, third time, plus, that's when they're like, oh, he's creepy. Oh, he's like weird. Or they already thought he was creepy to begin with, and they're like, you know what, let's give him benefit of the doubt because the first time, first impressions aren't everything, right? But then as they get to know him, it is confirmed that they do perceive him as being a creepy person. Apparently there was like one occasion where they saw Kohberger as very, very angry. They were in an office talking with other people, and Bryan just happened to be waiting outside the door. And so they thought that, oh, maybe Bryan wants to come in and talk to this person, but that person was like, no, and they just continued to keep talking, right? Kohberger at some point came to the room, sat in a chair, but nobody acknowledged him. When he realized this, he became angry and then stormed out. They described Kohberger as very angry, as if he had built up fury or rage. It was in her opinion that Kohberger became angry because he was ignored and nobody acknowledged him. They also described that Kohberger seemed to have known her schedule and to have intentionally tried to encounter her. Apparently, after the Moscow murders, it seems like he stopped coming into the office as much. Kind of interesting. They also mentioned that it was really strange that nothing deterred Kohberger, especially after telling Kohberger, hey, I have a girlfriend. I am a gay person, obviously. So they were unsure why Kohberger kept trying to pursue them. And then out of all the students, it was only Kohberger that made her feel this uncomfortable. Even the undergrad students felt uncomfortable around Kohberger. There are more reports of people hearing about Kohberger following people outside the parking lots or hanging around people's offices when they don't want him to. This one person said that they had a weird feeling where they saw Kohberger I think, talking to another person. And so they decided to hang out in the kitchen just a little bit longer and wash their dishes really slowly because they felt like they should be there. And this is where I really appreciate just humans working together to try to make others feel more safe and comfortable. Another WSU employee also mentioned how they saw Kohberger was like attempting to make small talk with this person, and that it was her maternal instinct that wouldn't allow this person to be left alone with Kohberger. So you know what she would do? She would try to find small tasks, small things to do to stay around until Kohberger would finally leave the office. And when he did eventually leave, they asked that person if, are you okay? Are you all right? And also, if you need anything, email me with email subject 911. So many people had the instincts that there was something off about Bryan Kohberger and that he was making people around him feeling super uncomfortable to the point where they were probably too polite to say anything to him, and they were just trying to maybe entertain him, or they didn't want to piss him off because they feared, possible retribution. You never know with people like this. Oh, not retribution, reprisal is what I meant to say. More observations from other people. There was an employee that worked at the bookstore, I guess at the cafe, and this person felt that Kohberger was really annoying, I guess, and wanted to leave every time he came in through his line. He's not fond of customers that talk too much, and Kohberger would often ask this person for a discount, like, for example, asking for an Americano, but asked for a brewed coffee price. He felt like Kohberger was attempting to flirt with another person and was absolutely zeroing in on her. He felt like Kohberger was bad at flirting. He felt that this person was too polite to Kohberger, which he felt Kohberger interpreted as flirting. He told this person he would start telling Kohberger she was on the phone so that he would come in so she wouldn't have to, or when he would come in, she wouldn't have to interact with him. Apparently, this person was too polite to ask him to do this. He did it on his own because he felt like if there was a woman receiving unwanted attention, he would want someone to do it for him. Thank you. Another observer, who was a faculty member, noticed that Kohberger would go into an office where several of the female grad students worked and physically block the door. So again, we're hearing about this physical blocking of the door. Once in a while, she would hear one of the female grad students say, "I really need to get out of here." So this professor would intercede by going into the office and allowing the female students to leave. Oh, gosh. Now, again, a story with the pool party. Before the pool party, Kohberger apparently showed up at this office saying that he was lost, he needed help, and asked the person where the pool was. The person was wearing a sundress with a swimsuit underneath, and while they were talking, he couldn't really control where his eyes were going, if that makes sense. She said he was blatantly looking at her, and most people are a little bit more discreet. It was just weird. So he went to the pool party, and she ends up going with her friend. While she's there, she notices that Kohberger makes eye contact with her and then beelines directly towards her. It seems like luckily she had a friend that picked up her uncomfortableness with Kohberger and that they were being weirded out by him and the staring that he was doing. So that friend did most of the talking with Kohberger. They said that it was very odd vibes. He wasn't really saying anything significant and his behavior was like a little bit erratic. And she just overall felt very uncomfortable about everything. And it was just very odd. Now, reeling it back to the cafe, remember, we've already heard from the employee that felt like he needed to protect his female coworker. Well, now we get to hear from the perspective of that female coworker. And she said that she saw Kohberger pretty much every day during the semester at the cafe, always near closing time, and sometimes over the summer prior to school starting. He liked to talk specifically with her. She believes he told her his name was redacted. Why redacted? Interesting. She believes he told her his name was redacted. Oh, like he gave like a different name or something. He would ask her questions about her school program, psychology. He asked about the psychological assessments that she was learning about, but she told him she wasn't interested in that area of study. Her friend was at the register once when Kohberger came in and he asked for this person by name. She was certain that she never told Kohberger her name. She doesn't wear a name tag. Yes, even though she works at the cafe. She was unaware of how he knew her name. He was probably sitting in the cafe, like listening and observing to see what people would call her by. Maybe the employee accidentally called her name at some point and he picked it up. It seems to her, Kohberger knew what hours she worked and made remarks about her hours. Kohberger would come in with a female, I guess, person, and she doesn't know her name. She asked Kohberger's female friend where she was from. The female told her to guess. She guessed redacted, and Kohberger remarked to the female, "See, I told you she was smart." This statement seemed too weird to her because she didn't think much of Kohberger, but it seemed like he had been talking to the female about her. She was always uninterested in talking with Kohberger, and she would try to walk away, but he would just keep on talking. She just told a coworker that she was uncomfortable around Kohberger and that that person would let her know when he would come in so she could avoid him. The staff member shared with law enforcement that Kohberger had alienated or irritated several female PhD students, as well as at least one female professor, with his behavior. Kohberger had alienated himself with the female grad students by this time, including 6 or 7 women. Kohberger came up with a line of thought where he said, "What if Kohberger had heard about this person behaving inappropriately with women, and what would this person do to defend himself against a false allegation?" I wonder if Kohberger just saw these complaints as non-truths and that maybe these women were just delusional. Or if he knew exactly what he was doing. Apparently, this person supported Kohberger, but it wasn't until the second incident that happened where the support was no longer there. There was a fellow grad student that apparently when they first met Kohberger, they kind of had bad feelings about him, but, wanted to give Kohberger a chance. So early on, they confronted Kohberger about the way that he would speak to women and also how he was being rude to apparently a deaf student. Now, ever since this, she felt like she was being targeted by Kohberger, and that Kohberger was since paying way more attention than normal to her. Kohberger would stand in the way so she couldn't get out of her desk and then just start talking to her. Kohberger would talk to her into the ground about how wrong she was about whatever topic he was interested in. Kohberger was also coming to her office and stand in the doorway and would not take any cues that she didn't want to talk to him. Now, I wonder if she was giving him negative attention, but to him, it's like, well, negative attention is better than no attention. At least I have someone to talk to. So I wonder if he saw it as I don't really give a fuck type of thing, that, I'll take whatever I can get type of attitude, right? This same person also kept track of the number of times Kohberger aggressively stared at her during class. In one class, she said he stared at her 9 times. She described instances of Kohberger following her after class multiple times, and that Kohberger always wanted to seem to be in the general area of her and others in the program that did not want anything to do with him. Her own husband met Kohberger at a barbecue. They actually talked. And after that conversation, the husband told her that he did not like Kohberger, so another man, and wanted her to be careful around him. Just a lot of people just getting red flags about Kohberger. And, I like to think that people aren't just crazy, batshit insane out of nowhere, because I feel like she must have dealt with so many things with Kohberger to the point where she was willing to tally the amount of times he was staring at her in a classroom. I feel like I wouldn't get to that point in the very beginning. It wouldn't be until someone was really pushing my buttons that I would start doing some weird stuff like that, to keep track of certain things. Now, I wish there was more details with this, but it's pretty short. Kohberger was in the back of the class near where she would sit, so this is a classmate. Or maybe, oh no, this is a student that he was a TA of. Kohberger always seemed to be staring at her when she would look up. Kohberger graded harshly and gave her a C in the class, and she stated, "I don't get Cs." Later, her professor changed into an A, agreeing with her that he graded it unfairly. See, I wonder what the timeline is. I wonder if he tried to maybe hit on her or something, didn't get what he wanted, and then he tried to get revenge on her by giving her a C or grading her unfairly. Or was he just all doing this in tandem and she was just getting mixed, I don't know, maybe some mixed emotions from him. Before talking with this person, she emailed Kohberger concerning her grade. She stated his comment was, "Sucks for you, you didn't know what you're doing." She found at times Kohberger would intentionally leave the class at the same time and follow her out to the car. How is this guy following out so many people to their car? Is he just choosing a new target every fucking day or something? Jeez. So maybe you're okay, well, he's creepy, maybe he's just trying to flirt and he just comes across as a very creepy person, but it's not intentional. Let's get into the next section where we talk about people complaining that Kohberger was offensive, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist. The list just goes on. Where do we start? There were complaints from faculty members, administration staff, and other students. This was referred to, I'm assuming, a department. These complaints reference his rude, belittling behavior towards women and his unprofessional rude dealings with his something. This resulted in a mandatory training class for all graduate students regarding behavior expectations. However, she said during Kohberger's attendance at this class, he sat all the way in the back with his hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling. Kind of why am I here? This doesn't pertain to me. This is not about me, when it's everyone's there because of you, presumably. Apparently, they said there was a total of 9 complaints filed against Kohberger. Ooh. So again, we're reading the red. He was perceived by female classmates as dominant and disrespectful to the female instructors. At one point, this person had come into the office crying because of the classroom discussion Kohberger was having with her. His behavior could be described as possibly sexist. He really did not like to be interrupted. Apparently, there was an incident with a female professor where Kohberger disagreed with the grade he had been given. Kohberger went to a male professor to complain about the grade. The female professor was redacted. They don't list the name in here. I saw this mentioned a few times. Apparently, there were students that were keeping a tally of how often Bryan would be late to male-led classes versus female-led classes. And the tally it showed that he was consistently late to female instructor classes and never late to male instructor classes. Oh, coincidence? Same thing here in the red. Kohberger was late for class, and she and fellow students were keeping track of his tardiness, comparing it to female versus male professors. Oh, there's a photograph of the tally board. Wait, do we see those photographs? I might have the photographs. Maybe. Kohberger's classmate talks about this harassment training that took place November 8, 2022, and it was rumored that the training was because of Kohberger. However, they were unable to confirm that information. Kohberger's behavior changed after that meeting, and she assumed his behavior change was in response to what they discussed in training. So maybe he did learn something, or maybe his behavior changed after, because that's like really close to the murders. Maybe that's why his behavior changed. Maybe both. Kohberger's colleague does mention a tally board in her office memorializing the number of times Kohberger was late to class, but not only that, there is also one to show the number of times Kohberger made discriminatory comments and behaviors to the cohort members. Apparently, there was a mansplaining incident that was reported about, I think it was a complaint written about Bryan Kohberger. Now, this was a topic of eyewitness misidentification that was being discussed, and this person was explaining her viewpoints due to her background in the topic. Kohberger was agitated and argumentative because he did not agree with their explanation. The classmate defended this person to Kohberger and tried to stop the debate. This person told Kohberger his arguing was mansplaining when speaking to this person. The person said Kohberger did not understand what mansplaining meant, but disagreed that he was engaging in that fashion. This person said the exchange made her upset and uncomfortable and left her not wanting to interact with any further with Kohberger. I remember hearing about this incident from many other different people, and I remember seeing that people saw this person was like really upset. I think they were like crying or something like that. So this makes it seem like I don't know. I just feel like it's not giving us enough information of what really went down, but just like a little generalization of it, I guess. But again, not too much details into this one. People were taking note that there were various complaints about Kohberger speaking to other staff and students and his stating of outspoken discriminatory comments that were homophobic, ableist, xenophobic, and misogynistic in nature. And so the staff member brought Kohberger into her office to speak to him about the complaints and maybe attempted to get him to correct his behavior. Kohberger's response, however, was that his deflection of personal responsibility, saying that his comments had been misunderstood. Here's another person saying that there was a mandatory discrimination and harassment training that was held for all grad students because of the issues pertaining to him. A classmate noticed that Kohberger was regularly late for classes where a female is instructing and rarely when a male was instructing. They said that on one occasion, Kohberger expressed to females in the class that once he was in the job market, they would be screwed and competing against him for a job. Oh gosh. I wonder if it's a tone thing, if there's supposed to be some casualness to it, some sort of levity, like he was joking or something, or maybe he was trying to acknowledge maybe certain women may face discrimination when competing against male applicants, or he was just being a piece of shit. Like, I don't know why you would say this unless you're just joking. I don't know. Another comment about how Kohberger made comments about women having a harder time getting a job as professor, especially when he hit the job market. One of the PhD students that were interviewed said that Kohberger was insulted that the department had brought on 2 women to fix his grading work as a TA. And that, again, they were keeping track of Kohberger being late to female instructor classes versus the male instructor classes. And that there was a whiteboard in the office where they kept track of the number of times where Kohberger was late to the female instructors presenting, or when he would cut off a female when she was speaking. They thought that Kohberger enjoyed conflict and was disparaging towards women. There was a PhD student that complained, saying that Kohberger did not like the fact that she discounted the offender in studying sexual assault cases. He said she was being dismissive of the offender. He thought she should be focusing on the offender and what they left behind. He thought the offender had a stronger impact on the crime rather than the victim, and she said he thought he was dismissing what she was doing just to argue. She said he was dismissive towards women and not men. Okay, so I don't know what to make of this one, but apparently this person stated that it was circling through multicultural class that Kohberger was a traditional person who believes in traditional marriage. Blank told us that there was a quite diverse group of students who are not traditional students. They told us about a student with unknown spelling who was pacing around her office near Kohberger's office. When that person was asked what they were doing, they told her that she wanted to put an ally sticker on Kohberger's office door. I did notice that there were ally stickers on the office doors of some of the staff members. Kohberger did not have one. That person explained to the other person that Kohberger did a presentation in the multicultural class and asked the class a question he did not get to hear the answer to. That person claimed Kohberger gave his answer to the class and said something to the effect of, "I already have my answer. It's wrong." That person said whatever the question was, it led the class to believe Kohberger was homophobic, transphobic, or maybe both. That person said she personally placed the ally sticker on Kohberger's door, and that person said Kohberger quickly complained about the sticker and she removed it. I get it, but I just feel like that's something I would probably just leave alone. I wouldn't be putting stickers on people's doors and forcing them to be an ally if they are not, and putting an ally sticker on someone. I feel like that is just aggressing even more, and it's going to push that person away even further. They end up moving the ally sticker anyways. Initially, I think a lot of us maybe thought that Kohberger was a awkward, shy, maybe a meek type of person, but no, we're getting a lot of information about him that he had no problem confronting people. He had no problem being aggressive, had no issues with letting people know what he thought, it seems. Apparently, someone overheard a confrontation between Kohberger and another professor, where Kohberger was confronting this professor about the participation point system and teaching methods in a very public manner, to the point where this professor was not allowed to disengage with this conversation. They made a point to say that they never heard of any other students having any issues with this professor and referred to this person as one of the best professors out there. There's also another teacher who teaches multicultural, and apparently outside of the building where the TAs were at the bottom of the steps, there was a confrontation between Kohberger and that professor that made her uncomfortable, and that they had trouble walking away from him as he wouldn't let her disengage. They said it was to the point that another student named Redacted had to intervene. They said that she didn't know what the confrontation was about. So I wonder if these were the two confrontations that ultimately led to, oh, you know what? No, I feel like there's so many other confrontations. No, because there was the other confrontation we talked about where he confronted a guy. I think these are confrontations with women, I think, right? Yeah, these are confrontations with the women. The other confrontation was with the guy from earlier in the video. I think this may be the incident. So, I forgot to highlight it, but this portion right here. Now, this person heard about another incident from another person where they told her about Kohberger and his mentor, who has a JD and was an instructor. Kohberger was a teaching assistant, and apparently Kohberger and this mentor had a disagreement in the office. They tried to explain the disagreement, escalated to the point of shouting and the mentor telling Kohberger to leave. However, what does Kohberger do? Classic Kohberger refuses to leave, and that mentor ended up leaving instead. Now, this person told the other person that they didn't know what the argument was about, but was surprised because it was the first time this happened with Kohberger and a male that she knew about. So I think this is the same argument that we covered earlier. So again, just more people's perspective or more people hearing rumors or talking to each other to reinforce other stories that we've heard so far. Kohberger starting over at Washington State University, I think he realized that he can be whoever he wanted to be. No one knew him. He didn't have social media for people to look him up, look up his background. If I remember correctly, I think he graduated from DeSales University with a 4.0. So he realizes that, hey, if I study really hard, I can get really good grades. I think the identity that he wanted to craft for himself was the identity of the intellect, putting all of his stats on intelligence and leaving, seems like 0 on charisma. To him, I think that people looked up to smart people, and he wanted to be that smart individual where people can revere to, especially at an educational institution. Now, if you guys remember being a senior in high school, maybe you also thought that you were the shit. You were older, you were there longer, you're more confident than the freshmen coming in. And maybe to Bryan Kohberger, he thought that he was at the higher rung of the, social educational echelon because he was a grad student, he was pursuing his PhD, he was a teaching assistant, and with that came, maybe some innate powers. No longer was he just an undergrad student. He had an office, he was grading papers. They were also funding his research. But people that were working with him, I don't know if they saw him as a pseudo-intelligent person or if he was just someone that, it seems like they didn't really have good things to say about him. Here's what they said. A grad student that was a colleague of Kohberger said that she couldn't relate any instances where empathy would have been used during their conversations. I guess they're trying to see if Kohberger seems like the empathetic type. She did say that he seemed very uptight and serious. He wanted to come off as intelligent. Her understanding was that Kohberger wanted to continue in academia and possibly become a professor. A classmate of his provided a brief overview of Kohberger's demeanor in the classroom and the need to assert upon fellow students his knowledge. Kohberger liked to over-explain offender decision-making, which was the topic for his final research paper on burglary. Here are some comments from his graded papers. This one he got a 90%. It says, "You write well and obviously have an excellent vocabulary. Try not to overdo the verbiage. Sometimes simple/concise structures are cleaner and easier to follow." Another one comments, "Careful with flowery language and constant use of passive voice, harder to read and interpret." This one says, "You have an impressive vocabulary, but at times you overdo it. Writing simply is not a bad thing. Try to strike a balance." Kohberger, apparently Kohberger had cuts on his hands, but this person didn't want to ask about it because of his general over-engagement in conversation. So when someone likes to talk too much and they kind of just go on and they're quite of a loquacious person, sometimes people are just like, okay, well, I don't want to make small talk with you because I know you're just going to talk my ear out. Another grad student and classmate described Kohberger as focused but arrogant. He wanted all his classmates to know he was the smartest guy in the room and wanted to highlight his academic prowess. The same grad student who confronted Kohberger about how he was talking to women, and then soon after, she felt like he was purposely targeting her, like trapping her at her desk or talking her ear off. And so she actually tried to report Kohberger, but she just felt like they weren't able to really maybe protect her if there was any retaliation. But this is what she had to say about him. "He wants to be seen as the smartest, strongest, most important person in the room. She said their class has sat for hours in class listening to him arguing with the teacher about his project. Kohberger always wanted to talk about offender decision-making. Kohberger gets very defensive when he feels like he's being questioned. On one occasion, that person had to cut him off when he was going on and on during one of his monologues. Kohberger responded that he felt it was rude when someone would interrupt him." Monologuing was a reoccurring term that I would hear being described of Kohberger doing. Now, I think Kohberger probably saw himself as maybe the smartest person, maybe even smarter than some of the professors. It seems like in his reports, people were making accusations that Kohberger saw the female professor as lesser. I think we've all come across a person like this where they see themselves as the most important, most smartest person in the room. And because of that, they think what comes out of their mouth is more valuable than anyone else's. So people like this might have a tendency to just overtalk other people, to overpower them, or to maybe even talk in monologues because they feel like, what's the point of having a two-way conversation with someone if I'm the most smartest one? And that instead of me listening to the other person's feedback, I'm just going to keep talking their ear off because obviously what I have to say is way more important than what the other person has to say. Being trapped in conversations like this can get very dull and very draining real quickly. It seems like he was just sucking the life out of people whenever he would open his mouth. Generally, I do think that people like this are not self-aware of their surroundings and they have a tendency to focus too much on me, rather than the other person. It seems like Kohberger was just seen as a very difficult person and that he was giving everyone a hard time. This instructor said that the week Kohberger was not in class, 3 female grad students approached her and said, "Oh my God, class is so much better today, like just easier to navigate." And then apparently her and her colleagues had a faculty meeting right before the Christmas break in which they discussed each of their students. Kohberger took up most of the time in this meeting because he was highly problematic. Another staff member and grad student says she first met Bryan a week before the start of the semester during the department's orientation. Her first impression of Kohberger was he spoke in a weird cadence with a robotic tone. Now, apparently there was a barbecue held for all faculty, staff, and grad students that were invited. Undergrads were not invited, and Kohberger went up to this person, introduced himself as Bryan, and asked what she was researching. She said that Kohberger was instantly off-putting as he attempted to explain the subject of her research to her. They also said that she was immediately done listening to him and that he rubbed her the wrong way with a conversation. Here's Kohberger apparently talking someone's ear off and not taking social cues when they would say they had to finish up work, and sometimes he would follow them to the parking garage. This comment we mentioned earlier where Kohberger told the females in class that if he was in the job market, they would be screwed in competing against him for a job. And so this person thought, well, maybe Kohberger was just socially inept. But after knowing him, she believes that Kohberger always thinks he is the smartest person in the room and has expressed resentment or jealousy at their successes. We've all seen that Reddit survey where Kohberger was trying to get participants to be in his research. This is the same thing that is reiterated in other people's reports when they talk about Kohberger's fatal study. And for example, here, They spoke about his field of study, offender decision making. He was particularly interested in how emotion played a role in how offenders make decisions. I've already read this, but again, this was an instructor that would deliberately not call on Kohberger at the end of the class because they didn't want him to go on these monologues. Also, Kohberger believing that he was probably smarter than other people and he would try to correct other students, even though it's not his job to do so. She heard from one of her students that Kohberger was telling other students that because she is a redacted, he knows better. I wonder if this is the same person where Kohberger stated that someone was inadequate to grade his papers because she was too foreign. I wonder if this was the foreign instructor that was a female, because remember, we were seeing reports about how Kohberger just didn't have any respect towards these instructors and how he would often show up late to their classes. Kohberger telling an instructor that he kept telling her he wanted to study emotions and decision making. Kohberger studied sexual burglars and their motivations and decision making. Kohberger liked to talk about sexual burglary because that was his field of study, and that Kohberger was interested in the emotions of what it felt like when committing a crime. Well, as you guys all know, one of the crimes that he was convicted of was burglary, and maybe he did it because he wanted to know how it felt. Quite crazy, right? I believe this may be an undergrad student that said that he was really interested in the psychology behind crimes. So far, there's just been a lot of negatives about Kohberger, him being awkward, creepy, having one to exert control, dominance, offensive, sexist, him thinking very highly of himself. Now, does he have any redeeming qualities? Was he at least a decent TA? Well, it seems like he even falls short of that as well, because a lot of people say that he was lazy. So it's like, you didn't even have at least good work ethic? Oh, goodness. You know, just because you got a 4.0, you were able to study and get good grades, doesn't mean that you might be a good employee and work well with other people in the future. There was a classmate that was questioned about Kohberger's overall performance in school. She stated that she did not think Kohberger was doing very well, as they can get a general idea of everyone's grades through the process of elimination. So we do have to wonder, was he even a great student? I mean, it seems like he was doing well with the sales, but maybe things were just falling apart at WSU. Here are some of the graded works that law enforcement found in Kohberger's apartment. It seems like the grades are pretty decent. I mean, I'm seeing like A's and B's here. I'm not quite sure if maybe the grades were falling the semester, or maybe this person was just maybe mistaken and they didn't know what they were talking about. Or I guess it's possible maybe he only kept the graded paperwork that were good. And then furthermore, while she didn't know his specific grades, she did know that Kohberger was not doing well as a TA, because apparently there was an instructor that complained about not getting help from, I guess, Kohberger. And about halfway through the semester, this instructor put out a request for more graders, in which she applied for and began performing. They also said that from their limited experience at the college, she thought it was rather unusual for a professor to request additional graders halfway through a semester. It's like, man, was there anything that you could do right? Lacking work ethic too? Ugh. Another classmate shared that Kohberger was routinely 1 or 2 minutes late to whatever class that was, and that there was this professor that was unhappy with his behavior and publicly scolded Kohberger on one occasion for being late. I think this is Kohberger's mentor, where they talked about difficulty in getting Kohberger to complete his task as a teaching assistant, and that he had been advised by the department higher-ups to be more direct and making his expectations clear to Kohberger. An undergrad student that had Kohberger as a TA said that they attended a criminal justice class during the fall of 2022 semester, and she liked the course and met Kohberger that first week. She met with Kohberger once in his office to go over her work on a brief. He gave her suggestions. She didn't like the feedback he was giving, but Kohberger came off as smart, but quiet and off, it says. He seemed kind of smart, not weird, just off. She believes that he only showed up to class twice. He didn't really do much. He was kind of a useless TA. Kohberger's professor complained that he would show up anywhere from 10 minutes late to an hour on one occasion. On that occasion, he brought a note from his professor. This person will be providing a copy of the note as part of the administrative subpoena. All Kohberger's graduate level classes are in the afternoon from 2 to 5, and there is only one per day. He would not have had any classes previous to hers unless he was acting in a teaching assistant's capacity. So she checked with the professor Kohberger was a TA for, and he told her he had advised Kohberger to leave his class early so he could be on time for her class. However, Kohberger continued to arrive late. What was he doing? I'm just saying, when I was an undergrad, yes, I showed up to class late here and there, and of course it happens, or you miss class because you're just tardy. Now, if you're in a capacity of a teaching assistant, you're working your PhD, graduate program, like that's really expensive, and you have way more responsibilities than an undergrad student. I would think that you would take it more seriously, especially if you're a hired TA, especially if these are the people that could potentially help you with your resume in the future. Or if Kohberger wanted to be a professor, of course, he's going to need some like letters or recommendations. I don't know what he was doing here. It seems like Kohberger thought he was so smart, but there's more than just intellect. It's actually being able to have good work ethic, navigate with other people, to be social, to get along with other people. That yes, if he did have the, let's say, the credentials on paper to be a professor, however, there's so much interpersonal skills that it seems like he might be lacking. Now, when the murders happen, it's not like the faculty member, the colleagues, the students, they instantly thought it was Bryan Kohberger that did it, right? Even with the information that they have with him being arrested already. A lot of them were actually really surprised that it was Kohberger. They were either shocked, they didn't peg Kohberger as the killer, they never even thought it was him. Even this person said that it didn't cross her mind Kohberger may have been responsible for the Moscow murders. One person did say that they had like a fleeting thought that it could have been Bryan Kohberger, but that's about it. This is kind of interesting. Apparently, someone claimed that Kohberger had stated that whoever committed the homicide must have been pretty good. Complimenting your own work? This conversation occurred approximately 3 weeks after the homicides occurred. They discussed the idea that students were getting ready to leave for the winter break right after the homicides occurred, and that this timing made it a good choice by the murder. However, there were comments saying that potentially he could have been a future rapist, or if he had his PhD and he was a professor, that he would probably be harassing people. Then maybe he was an incel. So let's get into this part. A classmate said that after talking with her friends and coworkers in the department, she feels very strongly that Kohberger is an incel, which is an involuntary celibate, and he thinks he deserves female sexual companionship. Again, this is just an opinion. But it seems like Kohberger did express to some people that he wished he was in a relationship. So it says he confided in someone in November that he wished he was in a relationship, and he expressed interest in female members of the cohort, but nothing materialized. Probably because he creeped them out, or maybe because he was perceived as sexist, or maybe because he was just really awkward and he would block people in. I don't know. It could be any one of those things. Apparently, Kohberger told someone that he didn't really have anyone to have guy talks with, probably because he wasn't making any friends with guys or gals, and that he briefly talked about women and dating, noting that Kohberger said, oh boy, he could pick up any woman he wanted in bars and in clubs. So I guess there's no humility there either, huh? This person noted that he felt the inference was that Kohberger did not view value in women and then saw them more as articles. Apparently, there was a story about Kohberger telling a female student that was both disabled and gay that he would need his partner to be physically perfect and a disability would not be acceptable. I wonder how this could naturally come up in a conversation. There seems to be a person that Kohberger may have had interest in and he was trying to hit on them. So Kohberger asked this person if she was single. She discussed her relationship with her partner. He asked about, okay, well, what about your other friends? And if she was interested in getting together outside of school. She said she just wasn't interested. She said that she had told him she had been redacted. I don't know if that's like maybe like sexually assaulted. That's my assumption. That's where my mind goes. And this is what apparently Kohberger stated, that he did not date broken women. I just don't think that's appropriate to bring that up in this conversation. Maybe if you were to say it in a separate conversation and that came up, sure. But saying it now when someone just shared a very, I'm assuming a very personal experience with you and you making this comment, again, just completely lack of social interpersonal skills. You dreaming? Oh, he's so passed out. He's so passed out. A professor in his field was able to see red flags with Kohberger during his short semester at WSU. She told her colleagues, he's smart enough that in the 4 years, we will have to give him a PhD. And mark my word, I work with predators. If we give him a PhD, that's the guy that in the many years when he is a professor, we will hear is harassing, stalking, and sexually abusing of his I thought would be his, his students or wherever university he attended. She also felt like he was stalking people. I mean, these are some serious allegations or, future allegations. A colleague told law enforcement that based on how Kohberger talked to women and how he treats women, people in the department thought he was a possible future rapist. Another student and staff member said that when asked to describe their professional relationship with Kohberger, she said they did not have one, nor did she want one based on her initial interaction with him and the rumors that she heard. Pretty much early on, she said she started leaving her door open when he was in the office, especially if there was ever a student in there, because they just wanted to make sure nothing was inappropriate. They felt early on that this guy was going to do something inappropriate with a student. They even spoke about it to her mom about Kohberger and referenced to him as the creepy guy. Now, a random little tidbit as I was reading these documents, someone mentioned that Kohberger had an obsession with serial killers, but that was only mentioned in one report. Another one said that Kohberger was the only student in the class that believed in the DP. Kohberger asked if her 12-year-old daughter was R-worded and murdered if she would support the DP. It's kind of weird how we have to say R-word, but then murder is a word that might be okay. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I always thought that was kind of weird on YouTube. Now, a classmate did say that they believe Kohberger committed these homicides because he wanted to know what it felt like to commit these crimes in relation to his studies. And ultimately, if he could get away with the crimes, further supporting his belief that he was smarter than others, which is what we were all saying for a very long time. They also said that committing these crimes and his need to control others is consistent with his personality. And and I gotta wonder if he realized that he was not putting on a good impression onto other people, that he seemed unlikable. There was feedback that he was getting, which addressed his behavior and him having to change. So, there must have been some awareness, right? And man, I gotta wonder, him having such a tough time at his new semester at WSU, him trying to start over anew, I wonder if all of this building up, him having issues with the other students, other university people, I wonder if this was, him murdering 4 students was a release for him of some way, or getting some sort of weird indirect revenge. Now we're going to jump over to this interview of Kohberger's jailmate, and I don't know, I'll just read it because it's kind of interesting. So the detective, they interviewed this inmate on March 2023. He couldn't remember the exact date, but believed Kohberger had been placed in their pod a few days after New Year's Day. After arriving in their pod, Kohberger immediately sat down and watched news about his arrest, watching multiple channels that were covering the story. Kohberger said, "Wow, I'm on every channel." Kohberger was quiet, and it was very awkward having him in the pod. He was describing Kohberger as highly intelligent, analytical, always trying to figure out what you're doing, but didn't know common knowledge things like difference between 2 muscle cars. Is that common knowledge? They described Kohberger's eyes as creepy, I guess, but other than that, he seemed like a pretty normal guy. They didn't talk to Kohberger very much, but when he did, their conversation was casual, small talk, never about the case. Kohberger would use 3 standard-size bars of soap per week due to his hour-long showers and excessive hand washing. Kohberger's hands were red from the amount of hand washing. I'm surprised they don't limit on how much water you can use. He was housed at Kohberger for about 3 weeks in total before he was transferred. Kohberger apparently shared that his favorite movie was American Psycho with Christian Bale. And around, I think there's another interview with a different inmate, or maybe the same one. Oh yeah, different one. They were housed with Kohberger from early Jan to February 15 of 2023. Kohberger enjoyed watching the news about his case unless it began talking about his family or friends. I don't know if he really had friends. I think it was more on the family part. At which point he changed the channel immediately. As time continued, Kohberger stopped watching the news related to this case almost completely. Yeah, because they're starting to learn more details about his life and picking everything apart about him. Kohberger analyzed everything. He wanted to know why people had preference on anything. He psychoanalyzes everything. They talked about his case sometimes, but never Kohberger's case. Oh, they talked about the inmate's case, sorry. Kohberger spent most of his time on a communication tablet talking with people, typically his mom, redacted, who he told to retain an attorney after he had seen maybe the mom on the news? I don't know. Kohberger washed his hands excessively, using 3 bars of soap per week, which caused his hands to always be red. So again, another person saying same thing. Kohberger showered every day, wanted new bedding and clothes every day. But did that mean that he was able to get it? Kohberger was very smart, easy to get along with, but hard to talk to because he talked over him due to Kohberger's vocabulary and topics of conversation. Kohberger also talked about his education a lot. Apparently, Kohberger loved baseball, with the Yankees being his favorite team. Kohberger also liked watching, Court TV, and was very interested in the Murdaugh trial. I wonder if he was a huge fan of Vinnie Politan, or maybe even Julie. Also, I wonder what his thoughts are on Murdaugh. Does he think that Murdaugh did it? The documents that I covered were just a fraction of the documents that were released. We pretty much did an overgeneralization of the summaries of these documents. However, when we got these police reports, I was like, okay, well, let me see what else is not covered in the summaries. And oh my goodness, It was a lot. Us going into these documents and then just seeing what everyone thought about Bryan Kohberger was quite insightful. And I mean, honestly, was it really anything surprising? I would say there were some comments that are just like, oh, holy shit, like I didn't expect that. I mean, quite honestly, I knew it was probably bad, but maybe not this bad. But imagine you're in a new town, you're ready to start a new life, and you got 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, everyone just doesn't like you. They don't want to be near you. They don't want to talk to you. They think you're a creep. Oh boy, I'm sure that once they heard that he was arrested, everyone just had a sigh of relief that he wouldn't come back for another semester. Because although it was said that he was terminated from his teaching assistant position, I don't know what the process of that was. If it was going to be something like, hey, he's terminated, he can't come back, or would he be terminated for a teaching assistant position but still come back as a PhD student? Who knows? Because I think getting kicked out of the school, maybe that requires a higher bar for that to happen. But yeah, Bryan Kohberger, man, not having a good time at WSU, just a huge, major downward spiral. I mean, his persona that he ended up crafting was a reputation of the creepy guy. I mean, not only was he unable to get along with his colleagues, with people of the opposite sex, or the students that he was a teaching assistant for, or even his own professors. I mean, it's like bad work ethic. This person likes to monologue. They have control issues. They don't take social cues. They're awkward. They're creepy, sexist. Like, it's just a lot here for a person. And quite honestly, if you read something here and you're like, oh, I've done that in the past. Like, for example, you've been awkward in the past, or maybe you asked someone out and they said no. That doesn't automatically make you a creep or a loser or awkward or whatever it is. It's just that combining everything together for Bryan Kohberger, it just looks really, 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 really bad. So anyways, I think we're done with Kohberger, quite honestly. We put this video off for quite some time because I did start doing all the readings, all my notes and all that stuff. But then Dana Adelson, her trial popped up and we were doing a lot of work for that. Woo, all right. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we are done with Kohberger. I'll keep an eye out to see if anything else happens because although I do want to shift the focus from Kohberger and I do want to look at any of the sealed documents that do come out about this case. I'm still very interested about that. The judge did say that he was going to go work with it with the state and the defense team. And it won't be a quick process. It'll take some time. It'll take weeks, months, maybe even some years for the documents to slowly be released to the public. Because, I still want to look over them. But anyways, y'all, thank you so much for watching. I know in the second half of the video, I didn't show my face just because I did my acne treatment again. And I didn't want to jump scare you guys. But honestly, I don't think my face looks that bad. It kind of just looks like Freddy Krueger. Is that bad? Nah. Freddy Krueger looks pretty cool. He's pretty attractive. So that's it for today, guys. Feel free to join the Discord. We do have a true crime section. If there's any true crime related stuff, feel free to post it in there. I know there's been some postings about the David, the artist. We'll see. I know that's a lot of research that I'm going to have to deep dive into. But what I'm mostly waiting for, if there's an arrest and there's any documents that come out. I typically don't usually get into cases before arrests happen, but we'll see. Maybe I'll dabble into it. We'll see what happens with that. But other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching. We'd love to have you guys come back again, hit the subscribe button so you guys come back, say hello, stop by the live streams, and I think that's about it. Have a good one. Take care.